Well, the problems regarding migrants are continuing across the globe as a small team of British Armed Forces personnel have now been sent to the Belarus-Polish border, where thousands of supposedly economic migrants remain stuck. The Belarusian President Lukashenko is accused of giving migrants tourist visas to help them enter the EU as a way of taking revenge against Brussels for sanctions imposed last year.
Well, most of the people waiting in the freezing conditions are fleeing war-torn areas of Iraq and Syria. Currently, the Polish army has deployed 15,000 soldiers to help protect checkpoints after a group tried to storm a barbed wire fence. For more insight into this difficult story is the Professor of Polish-Lithuanian History at University College London, Richard Butterwick-Pawlikowski. Richard, there has been a long history of migrants entering through this area, hasn't there? But never to this extent. I wanted to ask you about this claim that Alexander Lukashenko is kind of launching a hybrid attack in response to EU sanctions in regard to the protests in Belarus in 2020. Is he allowing migrants in order to spite Europe?
Yes, good morning, Ellie. I think you've hit the nail on the head. The Lukashenko regime is organising on a grand scale the flights, the hotels, the transport to the borders. But as soon as the migrants get pushed towards the Polish, Lithuanian and Latvian borders, that's when the Belarusian regime stops being helpful to them. The Poles or the Lithuanians or the Latvians will push them back again, and then the Belarusian border guards will not let them back into Belarus, and they'll brutally beat them and push them back towards the border. They're caught in the middle.
To what extent would you say that Minsk is a puppet of the Kremlin in all this?
I'm not sure that Lukashenko is a complete puppet of Putin. He's always had his own axe to grind. He's always sought a little bit of maneuver room. But the current EU sanctions and the current unity of NATO regarding the border has certainly made him more dependent on Putin. And Putin certainly wishes to test the EU's response. It wishes to test NATO's response. And once he finds a weak point, he'll keep on pressing until he can exploit it.
I was just thinking that beyond the activation of Article 4, really interesting to see what the organisation will do. And this situation serving as a perfect dilemma, really, to question the relevance of NATO.
It's certainly one of those occasions. It's no coincidence that there are joint Russian and Belarusian maneuvers just 20 kilometers from the Polish border. It's no coincidence that we've seen renewed attempts by Russian planes to enter British airspace. As soon as there is a sign of weakness, there will be further attempts to expose that weakness. And so the only way to respond is by impressive unity and strength.
And Richard, let's talk just very briefly about the conditions at the border there. We touched upon it there, freezing conditions. There have been reports of violence and shots being fired into the air. What are the scenes that we're seeing there on the ground?
Well, it's difficult for the media to approach on the Polish side because of the state of emergency that has been declared. So a great deal of the images are actually those which either the Polish government agrees to be fed to the media, or those which the Belarusian regime is supplying, which are, of course, even less reliable as an indication. But those sort of aid workers who have managed to sort of approach the border have reported that some migrants or refugees are getting across, and they're experiencing terrible conditions in the wet and often freezing conditions in this largely sort of forested and agricultural area. It's a horrible situation for people from Iraq or Syria for whom life has been miserable for many years, but they're effectively being weaponized by the Lukashenko regime and manipulated as part of the revenge for the EU's response to the protests against the obviously fraudulent election of of Lukashenko last year.